Well, in terms of institutions, really there was practically nothing. There was no significant venue for exhibiting art, because of course the gallery didn't come along until 2 or 3 years later. There were certainly friends I developed on the law faculty who were interested in the arts, who had traveled widely and knew a great deal about it. And there was, of course, the program in the College of Fine Arts. But we really had no significant exhibition space.
When the gallery first opened, it was the only museum for the city of Gainesville. And so Roy Craven and the administration of the university realized that they had an audience larger than the campus to deal with. So many of the exhibitions were Roy's decision to balance both the importance of these exhibitions for the university community, but also to educate citizens in Gainesville.
Most faculty people headed off as soon as the term was over. Really, most restaurants in town closed. The movie theaters closed when the university was closed. So there was not much to do. And I didn't feel like I was a permanent resident for the first several years. I was one of those who headed off to Europe or elsewhere, South America, during the breaks myself.
The audience here are both the community, but also thousands of students in the post-electronic age, all with cell phones and smartphones and computers. It's a different world today, although I think many of the ideas that plagued people in 1450 continue to plague us today.
So when the University Gallery came along, Roy Craven's directorship, that was a real breakthrough, I thought, and still think.
As a student, I had met Roy Craven, who was the first director of the University Gallery, as a student, and I used to attend the early exhibitions at the University Gallery. And Roy knew me, and I knew Roy, and he was a member of the art faculty as well. He was a very engaging professor when I was just one of thousands of students who would wander into the brand new architecture and art complex that had just been built during my 20th year on the earth in this around 64, I guess it was 1964.
I can't recall our first meeting, but we had a lot of friends in common, and because of we immediately discovered our common Tennessee roots and had discussions about that. But we were also both very interested in the Maya and in the Yucatan and in the other sites where the Mayas were, particularly in Guatemala. And I had gone as a law student to the Yucatan, and I had become very interested in the Maya. And of course that was an area of expertise for Roy professionally and from the standpoint of travel. So that had a lot to do with our early relationship.
Well, I'm not sure people realize that he was a very accomplished painter, an abstract painter. And if you Google Roy Craven, 90% of the time you will pull up information about his artistic background and career, as well as his administrative ability at the gallery.
Well, we became, good friends socially. We ran an organization on campus together called Arts and Civilization Seminar.
Yeah, Roy was a very exceptional person. He was the right person at the right time, I think, for not only the University of Florida. He was a well-accomplished artist. He had a great eye, and he was a very friendly, affable, very gregarious individual from Alabama, rural Alabama. Great charm, that southern charm. I never remember Roy without remembering a smile on his face. He was always happy to see people. And that tells you, I think, a lot about the perspective that people bring to human interaction. So he was a very positive influence for me.
So we saw each other increasingly, and then after realizing how much help he needed at the gallery, a small group of us decided to see if there was larger community interest in creating a friends group.
Roy was able to juggle his own interest and fascination in discovering world cultures and know the importance of doing it in the broader context. And I think he did it using the University Gallery as his showcase. The University Gallery was one of the first university galleries in the Southeast to exhibit African art. Now, it might seem not a big thing to us today, but it was a very big thing right after the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act. And here you had a man who was producing an exhibition of the civilizations of Africa at a time when race was still a very hot topic of discussion in the South.
Roy had served in India during World War II. As I recall, he was an aerial photographer. And when he could get away, he had a bicycle and pedaled around as much of India as he could, looking at architecture and at Indian art. So he became very, very interested, and when he returned after the war, he became one of the leading experts internationally on the art of India. And his book on the art of India, which is published by Thames and Hudson, has been in print now for, I think, at least 25 years. I've seen it on sale in the Louvre, translated into French. I've seen it on sale at the British Museum, at the National Gallery of Art there. So it's the primary text on the art of India.
Roy was a great specialist in Indian sculpture and miniature painting, especially northern Indian material. Our museum was given a collection of about 125 very important Indian miniature paintings, and I can remember calling Roy, and I said, if you have any time, he said, I'll be there tomorrow. And he came to Daytona Beach, and I set him up in the library, and he started looking through the collection, and I went into my office, and the librarian came in, and she said, Mr. Libby, you have to come into the library. This Mr. Craven is having there's something happening in there. And I went into the library, and Roy was so exuberant and excited about what he had discovered in these Indian miniatures that there were some expletives that probably were the sin of excitement rather than anything other than that. And the end result was several articles by Roy on these Indian miniatures, especially a set of 10 very important lost Indian paintings from the 17th century from the royal court of Gular in northern India, the Pahari style paintings. Roy knew of 2 at the Harvard University, and there were 10 here in this recent gift. And the end result was a beautiful book called Masterpieces of Indian Miniature Painting.
That is true for so many things in Gainesville. Began with a party. Mike and Buff Gordon at that time owned the house in Golfview we call the Castle. And so we invited a sizable group of people we thought might be interested in such an organization to come party and talk about it. Roy described his aspirations and his need for help. And as a result of that, we constituted ourselves an organization called the Gallery Guild. And then in April of 1975, we sent out a letter to a broad segment of the community inviting membership in this gallery guild.
When I came to the Museum of Arts and Sciences, there was no membership. It was operated just as a public museum. No admission charge and no membership. Well, to me, that devalued the entire effort. You know, it really didn't produce a context for people to buy into the importance and the need of the institution. And I can remember when we instituted $1 admission, the pushback from the museum board, they didn't think anybody would pay $1. In the first year, we raised $16,000 from admission. I can remember going to the city commission and arguing that the city commission needed to budget on a yearly basis a percentage of its total budget for cultural resources, not just the museum, but anybody who brought to the table, you know, information or programs that made the community more attractive and made people feel better about living there. And that took a while, took several years. And it took us probably 3 or 4 years on the state level to get enough of the legislature and a very charismatic Secretary of State, young Bruce Smathers, to realize, gee, the arts can be a very important part of the tourist experience in the state of Florida, and at the same time really ennoble our population. You know, give something back to the school system, give something back to the people who live there.
We had a steering committee that was chaired by Bill Hadley, a doctor here in town, and indeed the steering committee was primarily made up of community members, not faculty members. Roy Craven was on the committee, I was on the committee, and I'm not sure there was any other faculty member on the committee. But Bill Hadley commanded respect in the community, himself had a great interest in art, and Bill was able to interest Dr. Coffrin, who was a colleague of his, in supporting this effort. But in order to solicit money for a museum, of course, we had to have permission from the then president, Bob Marston. And although President Marston gave us permission to solicit, he really thought it was highly unlikely that anybody was going to give substantial money for an art museum. And when Dr. Coffrin did make that gift, it was at the time the largest single cash gift the university had ever received. Wow. And it was not a laughing matter anymore.
It was a very interesting period because there was no way to build at the university gallery. There was no possible way of putting in a large building there. So the university thought, well, we've got property west of campus, and the Natural History Museum was interested in expanding, and there were the theater department wanted a bigger theater, and the university decided we'll do a cultural complex west of town, and the Harn Museum was sited in its present location.
I'm sure you've read Richard Florida's The Rise of the Creative Class. He makes clear that the quality of life is what attracts the kind of industry and research we want in Gainesville. So art, the Harn Museum, the Performing Arts Center, the Natural History Museum, those are all very much quality of life issues. So it becomes an economic issue as well as an aesthetic issue. And I think that's the way you can sell this kind of support to those who are not particularly interested in art or music or what have you. If they understand that that's what's going to attract the industry and the people that you do want, then that's very compelling.
Well, then the question developed, should we have two institutions on campus competing against each other, both with permanent collections, both doing the similar kinds of things? And I think everyone held hands, took a deep breath, and decided that the Harn probably should be the collecting arm of the university, with permanent galleries and a large collection. And the university gallery would therefore deed over all of its collections. And probably 75% of the initial collection came from the university gallery.
Well, I think that the most successful part of the pitch was the children and the opportunity to expose children in this county and in this area to the arts. That's very appealing to many in the community, fortunately.
When the state tested school-aged children in these areas, that the children tended to perform much better in areas where the local museum had developed a relationship with the school system, and children came to the museum on curriculum-based visits. It really takes a painting in a book and puts it on the wall in front of you, or a piece of sculpture that's this big in the book and is a 12-foot bronze figure. It really brings the arts alive for kids, and there's been a demonstrable improvement in performance every time it's measured between those communities that don't have museums with active educational programs and the ones who do.
But from the very beginning, our long-term goal was a permanent art museum. We didn't know what form it would take, but that was a long-term goal. The shorter-term goals were assisting with exhibitions and openings for exhibitions, again, the docent program for the school children.
Then the question was, well, what should the new mission of the university gallery be? And Roy was very involved in suggesting that it should be the art of today. What's happening now, or what's happening in the future? Let's be what in my field is called a Kunsthall, a picture hall of changing exhibitions. No permanent collection, just changing exhibitions. And that was the initial vision for the university gallery.
One of the points we're trying to make in this celebration is that the areas of collecting at the University Gallery really dictated the areas of collecting at the Harn, the 5 areas of collecting.
You know, Roy's loan program later developed at the Harn Museum into a national collections sharing program that was picked up by one of the early directors at the Harn Museum, and it was run out of the Harn for about 5 or 6 years, and it allowed, again, Florida museums to borrow Picasso watercolors and works on paper from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It would have been impossible for me to engineer that loan in Daytona Beach, but doing it through the association allowed us not only to have it in Daytona, but in 3 other locations.
All of this really has to do with relationships. And Roy Craven was very good at developing relationships. And one of the individuals in Gainesville who became so important in all of this was a lawyer, William Chandler, Billy Chandler, who's known as Billy. Billy was a partner in one of the most prominent law firms at Gainesville, but he was a collector. And he collected some very interesting things, but without any focus. And he collected, he had a Picasso portrait, he had a Vlaminck, which is in the show. And I recall having dinner at his home and being in his little library and seeing the Vlaminck, and then Billy was pulling paintings out from under the beds and closets, and the house was full of art. But Roy Craven convinced him to focus his collecting, and indeed to focus on purchasing paintings by American painters of the first half of the 20th century. At that time, those paintings were affordable and not too difficult to find. And I am not positive, but my recollection is that they worked a great deal through the Kennedy Gallery in New York in purchasing the works. in any event, Roy essentially became Billy's advisor, much as Bud Bishop has done for Steve and Carol Shea at the Horn. And so Billy and his wife Eloise put together a very, very significant collection of American painting of the first half of the 20th century. So that served as a core, a nucleus. Some of the paintings were given during Roy's time at the gallery. Others were given when the Horn opened, but all of those paintings are the result of that relationship between Roy Craven and Billy Chandler.
I think the University Gallery is able to respond more quickly to opportunities in the arts that are happening all around us. Where the Horn Museum is an accredited regional museum with an audience that includes the community of Alachua County and other counties. I mean, the Horn is a major regional museum. The University Gallery is the quarterback, so to speak. They're able to respond to interesting opportunities, new things. Amy did an exhibition of Persian textiles about 6 months ago from a private Washington collection. It was fantastic. It was as good as anything you could see at the Walters Art Museum or at any of the major Northeastern museums. She was able to do it very quickly, did a beautiful installation, did a book on the collection. It would have taken the Horn 3 or 4 years because of its pre-established exhibition schedule and its commitment to both the faculty and to other departments to cover certain topics. It would have taken them a lot longer.
My goals are to recognize the impact that the University Gallery had in this community. And the first 25 years, of course, the shows that we were doing, the educational programs we were providing, but this was the direct impetus for the Horn, which is about to celebrate its 25th anniversary. So it's just a chance happening that we've got the 25th and the 50th going on basically at the same time. But while we might have had the Horn eventually, the fact that the University Gallery and its Gallery Guild was working toward that for so many years made it far more likely that it would happen. And clearly the Horn is a jewel for not just our community, but for the state.
Right. I think you've got the best of both worlds here. You've got a great museum, collecting museum at the Horn with some great treasures that are held in the public trust that are important for the state of Florida. The Herman Herzog paintings of Alachua County are some of the best American landscapes, southern landscapes in existence, and there are other great treasures there. And you've got the University Gallery capable of doing the Hector Puig exhibition of contemporary Puerto Rican santos that are just spectacular, so different, both so interesting and both very current, very timely. So I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm going to do everything I can to hang around as long as I can to enjoy it.